Most women think they know what pleasure used to feel like, but very few talk about what happens when that feeling begins to fade, or change, or disappear altogether. Maybe you've noticed it too, that quiet wondering in the back of your mind. Is it me? You tell yourself it's hormones, or age, or stress. You might even start to believe that the part of you that once pulsed with life has simply gone quiet. But what if that silence isn't an ending at all? What if it's your body whispering that there's more to discover if only you learn to listen in a new way? I'm Dr. Lia Parker, and if you stay with me through this conversation, I'm going to take you on a journey that very few women ever get to hear explained. By the end, you'll understand the 6 distinct ways your body can still experience orgasm. You'll also know which one often awakens later in life and why most women mistake it for something entirely different. The real reward comes at the very end, where I'll share a simple daily ritual that many of my patients call their return to feeling. I promise it's softer, simpler, and far more powerful than you think. Before we go deeper, I want you to do something for me and for yourself. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and how young you are today. I love seeing women from every corner of the world sharing their stories, because when we speak about these things openly, the silence loses its power. And if this topic already stirs something inside you, if it makes you curious or hopeful, click that little heart. It's a quiet way of saying, yes, I'm ready to listen. Now, I know how easy it is to think that desire belongs to the younger version of you, that the thrill of touch, the pulse of arousal, the warmth that once seemed effortless, all belong to a chapter that's closed. But here's the part most people never tell you. Your body doesn't forget. It adapts. It changes the way it speaks. And when you learn to understand that language, the slower rhythm, the gentler spark, the subtler waves, you realize pleasure was never gone. It was just waiting for you to notice it again. So stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to peel back the myths that have followed women for decades. Myths that made us believe orgasm was something performed, rather than something felt. I'll show you why that belief keeps so many of us from truly experiencing release, and why it's not your fault. Every minute of this video will bring you closer to the truth about your body, and to a kind of satisfaction that doesn't depend on youth, luck, or anyone else's approval. You'll see by the time we reach the end, you'll look at your body with new eyes, not as something that's slowing down, but as something that's quietly waking up again. Most women grew up seeing only one version of what an orgasm is supposed to look like. A few seconds of noise, a perfect ending, a scene that tells us how we're meant to feel. And then, when our real lives didn't match those moments, many of us started to believe something was wrong, that maybe our bodies were too slow, too quiet, too complicated. But the truth is, those stories were written for someone else's imagination, not our reality. In real life, pleasure doesn't arrive on command. It sneaks in softly, in waves, sometimes when we least expect it. For some women, it starts with a thought, a memory, or even a feeling of closeness. For others, it begins with warmth under the skin, a flutter in the belly, a spark that spreads in ways that don't look like anything we've been taught. And yet, because we've been told there's only one way to feel, many women don't recognize it when it's actually happening. Think back to the first time you ever felt something that made you blush, or breathe a little faster. Maybe it wasn't even during sex. Maybe it was a scent, a song, or a single touch that lingered just a moment too long. That tiny rush of aliveness, that's the real beginning. And what's so beautiful is that this beginning never disappears with age. It only changes shape. You see, for decades, women were told that orgasm is one single thing, the big finish. But our bodies are not machines with buttons to push. They're living, feeling landscapes. Every woman's body holds different paths, different rhythms, different kinds of release. Some happen quickly, some build slowly, like a tide rolling in. And some are so deep that you don't even realize they were orgasms until the wave has already passed. When I speak with women in their 60s or 70s, I often hear the same quiet question: can my body still feel pleasure? And I always tell them the same thing: yes, it can, but it may not arrive the way it used to. It's no longer about chasing the peak, it's about awakening the senses that have been sleeping underneath everyday life. There's one more truth I want you to hold on to as we go forward. The body follows the mind. When your mind feels rushed, distracted, or self-critical, your body tenses, and pleasure can't flow through tension. But when the mind feels safe, curious, and patient, something shifts. Blood flows differently, nerves wake up, and that's when the spark you thought you'd lost begins to return. In just a moment, we'll start exploring how this process unfolds, how arousal actually begins inside a woman's body, and why it changes as we grow older. I'll share something that might surprise you. The part of the body that controls orgasm isn't where most people think it is. Stay with me, because once you understand that, the 6 types of orgasms will make perfect, beautiful sense. When we talk about desire, most people think it begins in the body. A look, a touch, a kiss, and suddenly everything awakens. But for women, especially as we move through the later chapters of life, it often begins somewhere far more subtle. It starts in the mind, in the imagination, in the feeling of being seen, or wanted, or even just safe enough to exhale. Our bodies are like instruments, and the mind is the hand that tunes them. When we're rushed, worried, or self-conscious, the strings tighten, the music stops. But when we feel calm, connected, and curious, the sound returns, soft at first, then stronger. That's the quiet secret behind every kind of orgasm. It isn't only physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and it's deeply personal. Arousal in a woman's body is a dance between blood flow, hormones, and thought. And yes, hormones shift with age. Estrogen lowers, tissues may thin, the body can take longer to respond. But that doesn't mean the ability to feel is gone. It simply means the rhythm has changed. You might need a little more time, a little more warmth, a little more imagination. But once the mind feels permission to feel, the body follows. Think of it like lighting a candle. When you were younger, maybe it took only a spark. Now the wax is thicker, the air cooler, so it takes more care to catch the flame. But when it does, it burns with a softer, steadier glow. That glow is the beginning of arousal. Not just moisture or touch, but the whole body sense of awakening. The mind whispers first, the body answers next. What's fascinating is that this process can start in many ways. Sometimes it's physical closeness, sometimes it's an emotion, being admired or cherished, or even remembering a time you once were. Sometimes it's imagination itself, because the brain doesn't always need reality to trigger feeling. That's why women who have lost physical sensitivity can still experience deep pleasure through memory, fantasy, or sound. The body listens to the stories the mind tells, and once that connection forms, the body begins to prepare, the heart beats faster, blood flows toward the pelvis, the skin warms, the breath deepens. Inside, muscles begin to wake, as if remembering a dance they once knew by heart. But they don't move yet. They wait for something, for safety, for permission, for presence. That's where most women lose the moment, right before it begins, because they think, it's taking too long, or maybe I can't anymore. But that thought alone can close the door the body was just about to open. So instead, I want you to think of arousal as a slow tide, not a switch. It doesn't need to hurry, it just needs to be noticed. In a few moments, we'll start exploring the first 3 ways that tide can rise: the outer, the inner, and the one that hides quietly in between. And you might realize that one of them has been visiting you all along. You just didn't know its name. There's a moment, right before pleasure begins, when everything feels still. It's almost quiet inside your own skin. Then a flicker, a pulse of warmth that spreads outward like ripples in water. That's how most women first meet the clitoral orgasm, even if they don't call it that. It's the body's most familiar way of saying, I'm awake. For many years, we were told that this kind of pleasure was small, shallow, something quick that belonged to youth or fantasy. But it isn't small at all. It's the foundation, the opening note of the song. The clitoris is a whole network of nerves that wrap around the entrance of the vagina and reach inward, not just a single spot. When it's touched, whether by warmth, breath, movement, or even thought, it sends tiny sparks through the body. With age, those sparks may need more patience to build, more time for blood to flow, but when they do, the feeling can be deeper than ever before, not sharp, but full, like honey spreading through warm tea. Sometimes that wave travels inward. That's where the second type begins, what many call the vaginal orgasm. It feels different, less like a spark and more like a pull from deep inside. You might notice a swelling, a kind of fullness that grows with every breath. It's slower, steadier, more grounded. It's not about friction or pressure, it's about surrender. When the muscles inside gently tighten and release, the whole body responds. the chest softens, the face relaxes, the breath catches. Many women describe it as a kind of melting, as if something locked inside finally lets go. And yet there's another sensation, one that hides quietly between these two. It lives in a small spongy area just behind the front wall of the vagina. Some call it the G-spot, though for many, it's less about a spot and more about a zone of deep sensitivity. When awakened, it creates a different rhythm altogether, waves that rise and fall, often surprising in how emotional they feel. Some women laugh, some cry, some feel an ache that's not pain but release. This hidden orgasm often goes unnoticed for years, not because it's gone, but because it waits for gentleness, for trust, for curiosity without pressure. Each of these three, the outer, the inner, and the hidden, can exist on their own, or they can overlap. Sometimes they whisper to each other, sometimes one opens the door for the next. The clitoral spark may invite the inner wave, the hidden one might appear when both have already begun to hum together. That's when a woman realizes her pleasure isn't just one feeling, but a language, a series of sensations that speak back to her when she listens long enough. And once that language begins to flow, something else starts to happen. The body doesn't separate one feeling from another anymore. It begins to blend them, to create new layers of warmth and rhythm that reach far beyond what we thought possible. That's when pleasure stops being an event and becomes an experience. When those first sensations begin to overlap, the warmth outside, the pull inside, the quiet flutter hidden between, something magical happens. It's as if the body starts speaking in harmony. That's when a woman can experience what I call the blended orgasm. It doesn't belong to one place or one type of touch. It's the moment when everything connects, the mind, the breath, the heart, and every inch of the body. A blended orgasm often begins without warning. It may start with soft, familiar pleasure, then suddenly deepen into something that feels everywhere at once. It's not a sharp climb and a drop, it's a tide that builds, folds over itself, and then returns again. Some women describe it as waves rolling through their body. Others say it feels like floating, or like their heartbeat has spread to every part of them. What's most striking is how emotional it can be, a sense of being open, almost transparent, as if the whole body is breathing with you. But there are other ways the body can find release, ways we rarely speak about. For example, have you ever felt a wave of pleasure that rose from touch in places that had nothing to do with sex at all? Maybe from the skin of your neck, the small of your back, or the brush of fingertips along your arms. That's what I call the sensory orgasm. It's the body reminding you that pleasure isn't limited to one region. It can travel, it can echo, it can surprise you. The sensory orgasm often appears in moments of deep presence, when you stop rushing and start feeling again. It might happen during a massage, in a warm bath, or when someone simply holds you with tenderness. It's subtle at first, like a quiet hum that begins under the skin, but if you allow it, that hum can turn into a full-body glow, gentle, soothing, endlessly alive. It shows us that our skin itself is an organ of pleasure, and that sensation doesn't fade with age, it only becomes more refined. Then there's one more type, the most mysterious of all. Some women call it the release. It's the moment when the body lets go so completely that emotion spills out with it. Sometimes it comes as tears, sometimes as laughter, sometimes as a sudden rush of warmth or even fluid. It's not dramatic, it's cleansing. It's the body's way of saying, I've held this tension long enough. And after it, what's left is peace, the kind that fills every corner of you, from your chest to your fingertips. These deeper forms of orgasm often happen when a woman stops trying to reach a goal. They appear in stillness, in trust, in moments when the body feels safe enough to lead the way. That's the quiet secret behind pleasure at any age. It's not about doing more, it's about allowing more. And when that happens, something unexpected starts to bloom. Pleasure begins to feel less like a spark and more like coming home to yourself. Most women spend years believing that pleasure is something another person gives them. We wait for it, hope for it, measure it by someone else's rhythm. But the truth is much quieter than that and far more powerful. Pleasure doesn't come from someone doing everything right. It comes from a woman feeling safe enough to let her own body speak. That's what most men never truly understand, and what many women forget over time. When a woman feels she has to perform, to act like she's feeling something before she does, her body tenses. The moment she starts to think, I should be enjoying this by now, the connection fades, the muscles tighten, the breath shortens, the mind leaves the body. But when that pressure disappears, when she's with someone, or even alone, and she knows there's no expectation, everything changes. The body begins to soften, the heart opens, and pleasure can rise naturally. I've seen this happen again and again. A woman comes to me, worried that she's lost her desire, or that her partner no longer knows how to reach her. But as we talk, what I find isn't loss, it's pressure. The expectation to respond, to please, to perform. Once that expectation lifts, once she remembers that pleasure belongs to her first, something inside her starts to wake up. It's not about technique or timing, it's about trust, not just in her partner, but in herself. There's something beautiful about that moment, when a woman begins to reclaim her own sensations. It's like watching a garden breathe after rain. Color returns to her cheeks, her voice slows down, she laughs more easily, she begins to move from her own rhythm again. And when that happens, intimacy stops being a task and becomes a conversation, not about reaching an orgasm, but about discovering what feels alive. If you're listening right now and you've ever felt disappointed or uncertain about your body, I want you to know you are not broken. Your pleasure is not gone. It might just be hidden behind layers of self-judgment or silence, and every time you choose curiosity instead of shame, you loosen those layers a little more. That's what pleasure really is, not a single peak but a process of remembering. So if anything in this conversation has stirred a thought or a feeling in you, write it down. Even a single word. Sometimes naming what you feel is the first step in feeling it more deeply. When we strip away the myths about what orgasm should be, what's left is something far more human: connection, safety, surrender. These are the truths that make the body respond, that make the heart and the skin and the breath all move in unison. And in that stillness, in that soft, unhurried trust, something extraordinary begins to happen. It's not just that women find pleasure again, it's that they find themselves. There's a small moment that happens in almost every woman's life, a quiet decision, often unspoken. It's the moment she stops expecting her body to feel the way it once did. Maybe it happens after menopause, or after loss, or simply after years of putting everyone else's needs before her own. It isn't a loud change, it's a slow drifting away from her own body, as if she's standing nearby, watching it from a distance. And that's where I want to begin this part, with the gentle truth that you can come back home to yourself. There's a simple way to start, one that has nothing to do with sex and everything to do with awareness. I call it a reawakening ritual, though it's really more like a conversation between you and your body. It only takes a few minutes each day. You begin by finding a quiet place, your bed, a chair, somewhere soft where you can exhale. Then, without trying to change anything, you simply notice what you feel. Maybe it's warmth in your hands, a pulse behind your ribs, the rise and fall of your breath. Maybe it's nothing at first, just stillness. That's perfectly fine. Stillness is where the listening begins. Over time, this small ritual retrains your mind to reconnect with the signals your body sends. You might start to feel tingles in places that once felt numb, or a new kind of calm that lingers even after the moment ends. Some women describe it as lightness, others as a quiet hum, as if something deep inside is waking from a long sleep. It isn't about chasing a reaction, it's about remembering that your body is still capable of pleasure, even when you're not thinking about it. What makes this practice so powerful is its simplicity. No pressure, no performance, no expectation, just presence. It's the same presence that allows all 6 types of orgasm to exist. When you give your body this kind of gentle attention, blood flow improves, nerves grow more responsive, and your body begins to trust you again. That's when pleasure starts showing up in unexpected ways, a laugh that feels warmer, a walk that feels lighter, a moment of touch that sends a spark you haven't felt in years. If you try this tonight, even for just 3 minutes, pay attention afterward. Notice if your breathing feels deeper, if your thoughts quiet down just a little. These are small signs of your body saying thank you. You don't have to rush, you don't have to prove anything. This isn't about becoming someone new, it's about returning to someone you already are. The truth is, your body has never stopped speaking. It's been whispering all along, through sensation, emotion, memory. And when you finally slow down enough to listen, those whispers turn into something beautiful. They remind you that pleasure isn't about youth, it's about aliveness. It's about the simple joy of feeling, once again, completely yourself. When a woman begins to listen to her body again, something inside her changes. Not just in how she feels, but in how she moves through the world. She starts to carry herself differently. Her shoulders soften, her eyes look brighter. Even the way she breathes feels fuller, freer, as if her body has remembered that it belongs to her. And that's the quiet miracle of all this. Not that pleasure returns, but that you return. Every story I've heard from women over 60 has its own rhythm. Some say they felt their first spark again after years of nothing, just while sitting quietly, hand resting over their heart. Others describe a sudden rush of warmth, like their body was saying, "I'm still here." And some simply notice small changes, a gentler mood, easier laughter, a new patience with themselves. These are all signs of awakening. Tiny at first, but they grow. When women share these moments with me, there's always the same expression on their face, surprise mixed with relief, as if they can't believe their body still remembers. And yet it does. The truth is, the body never forgets joy. It only waits for permission to feel it again. It doesn't matter how many years have passed, how many fears have crept in, or how many times you've thought, maybe that part of my life is over. It never really ends. It only rests. So if any part of this story has touched you, if you've recognized a feeling or remembered something your body once knew, I'd love for you to write one word in the comments that describes what you're feeling right now. Not a long story, just a single word that captures your mood. You'll be surprised how powerful it feels to say it out loud, even in a space full of strangers. Because when we share, we remind each other that this chapter of womanhood is not about loss, it's about discovery. Imagine what could happen if every woman who felt invisible, disconnected, or unsure suddenly realized that her body was still capable of deep pleasure, not because someone else gave it to her, but because it's hers by nature. That realization changes everything. It softens marriages, it heals silence, it brings a quiet glow back into ordinary moments. You've now learned that there isn't just one kind of orgasm. There are 6 ways your body can speak the language of pleasure, and maybe even more waiting to be found. But even beyond that, you've learned something deeper, that your body is wiser than any myth, stronger than any clock, and infinitely capable of renewal. And maybe tonight, when you lie down and feel that first slow breath, you'll sense it, that small pulse, that whisper of warmth, that reminds you that you are still whole, still alive, still beautifully capable of joy. And that realization, more than anything else, is what makes life feel new again.